Good evening and welcome to Arizona Illustrated for Monday, the 17th of September, 2012. I'm Tony Paniagua. Democrats and Republicans are ramping up their efforts to get out the vote in the all-important general election in November. Much of the attention is being placed on the nation's fast-growing Latino population, and analysts say Hispanic participation will be pivotal. Next, Michael Chihak brings us an interview about this topic.
Deyanira Nevarez Martinez, State Coordinator for Mi Familia Vota. Thanks for being with me.
Thank you for inviting us.
We in the media tend to portray the Latino electorate as a sleeping giant. Is that an accurate or fair portrayal?
Well, I think that that portrayal has been going on for quite some time, and I think that it's fair to a point. I think that the reason that the media started to talk about it a lot more is because we're waking up and there's signs of that all over, and so that's why I think it's resurfacing more often.
Now, Mi Familia Vota is an organization that works to register people to vote, but also to help people gain their citizenships. Mm-hmm. What kinds of results are you seeing on the voter registration side?
We're having success. This year, we're on track to meet all of our goals for the 3 areas that we're in right now. We have teams in Pima County, in Maricopa County, and we just brought a team on in Pinal County. So we're right on track to meet those goals.
And what are those goals? What kind of numbers are we talking about?
In the Pinal County area, we want to register 300 Latinos. In Tucson, we want to register 1,750 new voter registrations of Latinos. And in the Maricopa County area is a lot more significant, close to 5,000.
And what are your tactics? Do you go door to door? Do you stand in front of grocery stores? All of the above?
We do all of the above. So we have some very good partnerships with some local grocery stores, and we also have a partnership with several community health centers here in the area. And so we stand outside their locations and register people to vote. And we also have a canvassing component where we go door to door. And
you're nonpartisan, is that correct?
Yes, we are.
And what are the barriers that you run into for getting people to register to vote, especially Latinos?
A lot of times people will tell us, well, my vote doesn't count, it won't matter. And so trying to get that education out that it does matter and it does count is very important.
Now, what do you say to somebody? How do you explain to them that their vote does matter?
Well, I think what we do is we explain to the person how the process actually works. A lot of times they say that because they don't understand the process. And so we explain to them that in this country, we're very lucky that our vote does count and it does matter. And so we've had quite a bit of success when we actually explain the process to the person, because a lot of the times it's just a lack of education that they don't understand the process.
Now, getting people registered to vote is one thing, but actually getting them to vote is quite another. And in fact, Latinos are known for their low voter turnout. Mm-hmm. What does your organization do about that?
Well, we have GOTV efforts, and so we do as much as possible to try and get people to go out. But one of the significant things that we're doing is trying to sign people up to vote by mail, and trying to sign them up on the permanent early voting list, which we call the PEVL. This gives the person 26 days before the election to look over the entire ballot, to familiarize themselves with the issues, but also it gives us, Mi Familia Vota, 26 days to try and get them to turn it back in. And so that's one of the biggest efforts that we have going on.
Now, early voting has become more of a trend. In fact, in Pima County for the primary election, we understand the vast majority of votes were early voting, but Latinos lag in that area as well, turning in early votes, so you're working to educate people in that regard.
Yes, and the main focus of our canvassing, which is our door-to-door, is to try and sign up Latinos that are registered to register to vote by mail. We've seen throughout the different elections that Mi Familia Vota has been active here in Arizona that turnout increases significantly when we register Latinos to vote by mail.
And what are the voter identification issues with Latinos, getting Latinos to the poll? Because some of those rules are pretty strict here in Arizona.
Yes, and I think that that's why turnout is increases significantly when you vote by mail, because you don't have those issues of going to the poll and having to have that right then and there. But we do see, for example, Mi Familia Vota has been working on a back-to-school campaign where we register eligible high school seniors to register to vote, and so a lot of the times we'll get to a location and we're signing them up to vote, and a lot of them don't have driver's licenses because then they'll tell us, well, I don't have a car, why would I need a driver's license? And so that person, if they were to be able to register, wouldn't be able to vote if they show up to the poll because they don't have a driver's license. And so those are some of the issues we're seeing in the community, and it also affects people who are lower income that can't buy that ID that's about $12, or it also affects people that are older that can't have someone drive them to the DMV to get that ID, and those type of issues. So.
We have just about a minute remaining. In that time, please tell me what you think the Latino voter impact will be in this fall's election, most especially for President and U.S. Senate here in Arizona.
I think it will be really significant. In the last 4 years, since 2008, the Latino electorate has expanded by about 41%, which translates to about 169,000 new Latino voters, which is pretty close to the margin of victory for Senator John McCain in the state in 2008. So I think that in a very close race, that margin can sway an election.
Today marks the 225th anniversary of the signing of the U.S. Constitution in Philadelphia, and the National Constitution Center has been holding various events throughout the year. Here in Tucson, the Rehnquist Center at the University of Arizona College of Law holds an annual Constitution Day. We went there Friday afternoon and spoke to some of the attendants about this historic document in today's world.
They're seeing the federal government act.
The annual Constitution Day program at the Rehnquist Center is attended by a variety of Tucson residents, from attorneys and judges to professors and students. They come from different backgrounds and experiences, but they share a passion for the rule of law and a respect and admiration for the Constitution.
I think it's a very important document. It's the foundation of our country's government. It does lay out some very key things that our government operates on: separation of powers, the various Bill of Rights, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, etc. And I think that that's a document that transcends into modern time. It's something that's important today as it was back 225 years ago.
I immigrated to this country. I was originally German, and I'm very, very proud to be an American today. And so I live and believe in this Constitution.
I live nearby, and I come to many lectures here at the university. I've graduated from here 3 times, and they provide continuing legal education, so that's why I'm here.
On this occasion, there are various topics that are familiar to many Arizonans and often lead to heated discussions and debates. These timely issues, such as health care, the Voting Rights Act, and immigration, illustrate the relevance of the Constitution in today's society, even though the document was signed in 1787.
Anyone who says it's a dead document hasn't kind of experienced the kind of dialogue that is just so incredible, and that we can see here in events like this, and kind of bring it back to the public about how relevant it is to their daily lives, both here in Arizona and just across the country on these issues, especially healthcare and immigration. It's amazing.
We need a lot more education. People need to understand how important the Constitution, which sounds like a dry legal document, is to the preservation of their freedoms. In the 18th century, we got a Constitution because we were freeing ourselves from the oppressiveness of a king and of a government of England. And the idea was to create and preserve a society where people have freedoms and yet where the government fulfills its function. So if you don't know what the Constitution does for you or what it's supposed to be for the society, then obviously you don't have an appreciation for its importance and you can't take advantage of it.
I am specifically concerned about SB 1070. I don't believe that I or anybody else with the same skin color should be subjected to search of papers or show me this or show me that. I think it will induce and has induced racial profiling. Of course, that's not the issue that went to the Supreme Court, nor was it the issue that was discussed here. And that is the most important aspect of that, of SB 1070, and that's why so much of the community opposes it.
And that can lead to common concerns about those who must work with the Constitution. The document provides a framework for our government, but it doesn't cover every possible scenario. So in the Supreme Court, for example, 9 people are responsible for making pivotal decisions based on their particular interpretations.
I think it actually strengthens the Constitution. Our country has shown that it will adapt and it will change, and the Constitution does allow for that, and it does, further the American dream of, changing to the times and that sort of thing.
If you're of a particular frame of mind about what the Constitution should do, then you think that your side is following it. If you're of a different frame of mind, then you think the other side is kind of elaborating on it. But necessarily something that is as important, as fundamental, and also as applicable over so many years is going to need some interpretation. So the judges are going to have to decide how principles that are more generally expressed in the Constitution apply to the concrete facts of a particular case.
A lot is said about the Constitution, whether people are following or not following it, or interpreting right or interpreting it wrong. What is your take?
We have to go by what the Supreme Court does. They are very wise people. I believe in their credentials. And of course, the Constitution is debated and we are changing slightly, but this is what the Founding Fathers did. And we need to just to go by those principles.
Each Chief Justice, each Justice of the Supreme Court has, their own interpretations of each case, each law, and so it's, from a historical standpoint, it has been changing. It is a changing document. It's a living document.
And it is expected to become even more lively in the near future when Americans either re-elect President Barack Obama or choose Mitt Romney for the next 4-year term.
One thing that I did hear in there was that who the next president is determines maybe 3 Supreme Court justices. And that's very, very important to me and also to the majority of the population in the United States, because when you get to appoint 3 justices, in a 4-year term, people need to become aware of that, and they need to understand what the consequences will be and how it will affect them in terms of workers' rights, in terms of health care issues.
I mean, that's why this election is just so crucial. And why people really have to think more than just the day-to-day politicking back and forth. I mean, you got to think long term. You got to think about these other positions and the fact that the president appoints these positions, how important that really is to the rest of our democracy.
While millions of Americans have taken many of their freedoms for granted, other countries are still in the process of trying to transition into more democratic forms of government. Tonight, we learn about some of the social and political challenges in Egypt following the ouster of their leader last year. Eakin is a University of Arizona graduate student in journalism who recently returned from a summer trip to Egypt where she worked as a reporter. Andrea Kelly has that interview.
Joining us in the studio now is Eakin, an Arizona public media intern and a graduate student at the University of Arizona who just recently returned from spending the summer in Cairo, Egypt. Thanks for coming in, Britton.
Thanks for having me, Andrea.
So we talked in the beginning of the summer before you left town. You were headed out to Egypt. You were going to work at a newspaper there. You intended to cover some of the elections that were happening and some of the political fallout from those. Tell us how that went.
Well, when I got to Egypt, I realized very quickly that the political situation there was rapidly changing and it was very difficult to keep up with the pace of it. And this was true even for many of the seasoned reporters in my newsroom at the Egypt Independent. Things were changing at such a rapid rate that it was really difficult to keep up with how quickly things were changing. I saw that Parliament get dissolved while I was there, part of the emergency law reinstated, presidential elections. The challenge with trying to cover politics in Egypt this summer was that things were sometimes outdated very quickly after you wrote them. So I realized at a certain point that it was going to be too much of a challenge for me to write about politics, that there were other people who were more qualified to do that. So I ended up writing for the environment section of the Egypt Independent, which was great because it put me in touch with a totally different aspect of Egypt that I would have gotten to know otherwise. And also I think there's a huge focus on politics in Egypt right now and not so much focus on some of the other stuff that's going on there. So I got to see and do some really great things when I was there.
But even if, as you were covering, maybe something you weren't expecting to cover and something different there, you still lived there. Your office was still basically in Tahrir Square, correct?
It was very near. Yeah.
So what did you see then as sort of, a resident of Cairo for that summer? How did things go as some of the big political movements that you were talking about with the parliament and the president, and even when he fell ill in his trial? And, how did that go as somebody just observing it then?
It was very interesting to watch and see and to speak with Egyptians. That was probably my favorite part of my experience this summer. It was just speaking to ordinary Egyptians and hearing their thoughts and opinions. Every single person that I spoke to had something different to say. And it was very interesting to sort of watch people react to the things that were happening, to see the protest movement get renewed while I was there in the wake of the verdict of the Hosni Mubarak trial. Tahrir Square came to life again in the immediate wake of that. And I did spend quite a bit of time in Tahrir Square. Not so much after dark, because it really didn't feel safe for me to be there alone as a woman at certain times. But I tried to be there as much as possible. I went out in the evening after they announced the official results of the presidential election, that Mohamed Morsi had won. And there was just a huge celebration in the streets. Everybody was out waving Egyptian flags. And, I got the sense from people that no one really had a preferred candidate. People didn't necessarily vote for Morsi or for Shafiq, but kind of against the other person. But still, in the end, there was a huge celebration because this was the first time that Egyptians got to go to the polls and pick a leader in what, for all intents and purposes, was a free and fair election. So there was a huge, huge celebration from that standpoint, and that was pretty amazing to witness.
Now, you were also there working, part of your time there you spent working on your graduate thesis as a University of Arizona journalism and Middle Eastern studies student, and you were talking to people and journalists about freedom of the press, correct?
Correct.
What did you discover there? I imagine it's different than in America.
It is. Yeah, it is different because although there was a loosening of the press in the early 2000s, it has historically been pretty repressive in terms of press freedom, although probably more liberal and open than other places in the Middle East and North Africa. But along with the revolution came a huge opening in press freedom. People are no longer afraid to voice their opinions. There are a lot more op-eds, for example. The military and the government are not necessarily taboo topics that are off limits anymore. Having said that, there is still a difference between the English language press and the Arabic language press. There's more freedom in the English language press simply because it doesn't reach as many people. The government's not as worried about its influence. But that seems to be, based on what I've talked to people, what will be one of the lasting legacies of the revolution is a transformation to press freedom. However, there are still issues around access to information. You have basically the legacy of an authoritarian government and a culture of secrecy. That's going to take a while to break down.
We've got just about 30 seconds left, but I wanted to ask you about the difference between some of the events that you witnessed were portrayed in American media versus seeing them in person.
Night and day, I would say. We don't get a good idea here of what's really going on. Even being on the ground there, it's hard to tell what's really going on. But my mom, for example, would be very worried about my safety, whereas I felt perfectly safe while I was there. So I would say Americans are not getting all of the information that they need to really understand what's happening there.
Britton Eakin, a University of Arizona graduate student in journalism and Middle Eastern studies, thank you for coming and sharing your insights on your summer in Cairo.
My pleasure. Thank you, Andrea.
Arizona is home to 21 federally recognized Native American nations, which gives us a great opportunity to learn about our continent's first inhabitants. This weekend, you'll be able to witness a colorful tradition from the Hopi people when they exhibit some of their quilts at the Arizona State Museum in Tucson. For more on that, we are joined by Diane Dittemore. She is the Ethnological Collections Curator. Also here is Lisa Falk. She is the Director of Education. Thanks for being here.
You're welcome, Tony.
So we're going to have 2 days full of activities on Friday and Saturday. Let's begin with Friday, Diane. What are the highlights of that day?
Well, the afternoon will begin with a workshop that's being led by Karen Tutsi, who is a Hopi quilter, and she'll be in town in Tucson this weekend because she's been nominated to the Arizona Quilters Hall of Fame. And so we're very honored to have her sharing with people opportunity to learn about a quilting tradition. This is a quilt that she has made, and you can see that each one of these panels is painted and then put together. And so she's going to be doing a workshop on making these quilt block panels.
And what is the history or the tradition of the Hopi quilts? How far do they go, and how did it all begin?
Well, Hopis began quilting with the coming of American missionaries in the late 19th century. Their Baptist and Mormon missionaries came and brought along this tradition that has a very long history in America. And the Hopis have taken the quilting tradition and sort of turned it into their own particular style.
All right, Lisa, and then on Saturday there are also activities, and you have a quilt right here next to you. What do you want to tell us about this one?
Sure. This quilt's the Papago Activities Quilt. Papago is an old term for the Tohono O'odham, and it shows activities that happen on the reservation. It was made by Goldie Richmond in the 1960s. She had a trading post out there, and in the year 2000, it was designated as one of the 100 best quilts, most important quilts of Arizona. So that's pretty interesting. But one of the activities we're doing on Saturday, everything's family friendly, is to make our own quilt patch. You can use it as a pot holder and have 4 of these images on it as a photo transfer. So that's kind of nice. We'll have other fun activities in the museum. We're going to be working with the Allen Panther group, which is a programming for refugees funded by the Hopi Foundation, and they're going to be doing word and image quilts with people, and we'll have a discovery hunt in the museum. You can learn about the Tohono O'odham or about the Hopi through our exhibits there. And one of the interesting things for both Friday and Saturday is we have a group of quilters coming from 1st, 2nd, and 3rd mesas from Hopi that will be selling their quilts. So you can come and meet Hopi quilters, see them demonstrated, and go home with a Hopi quilt.
All right, great. And there's going to be lectures and workshops on Friday. What do you want to tell us about that?
The lecture is, we're honored to have Carolyn O'Baggy Davis, a local author, who will be making a presentation. She's a scholar through the Arizona Humanities Council. She's going to be talking about the history of Hopi quilting. She published a book a few years back, Hopi Quilting, Stitched Traditions from an Ancient Community, and so she'll be sharing with people details of this fascinating history of Hopi that has allowed a tradition that's very, very old to be turned into something that is uniquely Hopi.
And we have another example of their work right here, this beautiful bold red, white, and green, and black. What do you want to say about this one?
This is a quilt that is patched together that shows a traditional woven Hopi dress, and then it's against a backdrop of what they call a Hopi manta, or a woman's shawl. And this is actually made by a Hopi man. Unlike maybe in mainstream American culture, Hopi men traditionally were the weavers of clothing, and so it's very, very common to find Hopi men who are quilters as well.
And Lisa, why is this a good opportunity for local residents to find out more, as I said in the introduction, about Native Americans in our state?
Well, we have an exhibit that showcases 10 of the tribal groups in the state. And we'll, as I said, we'll have discovery hunts that will draw people in to experience more about those cultures. We'll have hands-on objects. You can meet the Hopi quilters and actually talk to them, which is special since Hopi is so far away from here. So that's another thing. And then and this quilt in its entirety, it's much bigger than the little bit that we have here that you can see, will be on display as well.
So they're traveling from northeastern Arizona, which is one of the reasons they're not here today.
Right, they're coming in Friday for the evening event.
All right, where can people get more information, Diane?
Well, we have a website, www.statemuseum.arizona.edu, where there's a whole schedule and a list of activities and information if people do want to sign up for the workshop on Friday afternoon.
And of course, this is one of many different functions or events that you have throughout the year, Lisa, right?
That's right. That's right. Our big one for meeting Native artists is our Southwest Indian Art Fair in February, but we have lots of things going on. We do a Native Film Festival as well, and all kinds of events. The other thing I wanted to mention is we welcome teachers and families at the Saturday event, and we will be giving out professional development hours for the Saturday event for teachers.
All right, Diane Dittemore and Lisa Falk, thank you very much for joining us. The event will be held this Friday and Saturday. Good luck.
Thank you
very much. We'll see you at the museum.
In tonight's video postcard from photographer and editor Santiago Batti, we take you to Science Sundays at the Tucson Children's Museum. Arizona Public Media is involved with these events to engage children in science-based learning and activities.
Did you guys want to come on and make a windsock?
Make a little tie on that. There you go.
Perfect. Nice. So, you're very welcome. Good.
You can get more news and information on our website, azpm.org. To comment on any story you saw tonight, click on it online and go to the bottom. We can also be reached via Facebook and Twitter. Coming up tomorrow night, you've probably heard about the obesity epidemic in the United States. We'll tell you about a program that is trying to make a difference in Pima County. We'll speak to a hospital nutritionist about good eating and fitness habits and why planting a tree can save you money. I'm Tony Paniagua. From all of us at Arizona Public Media, have a great night.